The sins of the fathers shall be visited upon the children. These were more than words carved into forgotten scripture. They were an ancient warning echoing through time. And in the cold, shadowed corridors of 17th century Spain, that warning took on a human form. His name was Charles II, but to the fearful whispers of his court and his people, he was known only as El Hechizado, the Bewitched. Born into the most powerful royal dynasty in Europe, Charles entered the world not as a promise of glory, but as a living omen. His body was frail, his jaw grotesquely protruded, his tongue too large for speech, and his mind clouded by a fog no physician could lift. Yet the tragedy was not simply medical. It was metaphysical. His existence seemed to defy nature itself, so warped were his features, so broken his spirit that those around him began to suspect witchcraft, curses, or some divine punishment. Was this the price of centuries of inbreeding? Or had the royal bloodline violated something deeper, something sacred and unseen? This is not just the story of a king. It is a riddle carved in bone and legacy, the crumbling reflection of an empire that ignored the laws of balance. In this journey, we will explore the esoteric significance of Charles II's condition, the ancestral patterns that shaped him, and the forgotten spiritual knowledge that could have warned them all. For in the body of a broken king, we may find the mirror of a fallen kingdom man, perhaps a warning meant for our own time. The fall of Charles II was not an isolated tragedy, was the final echo of a bloodline that had defied nature for centuries. The Habsburg dynasty, from which Charles descended, believed their power was divine, untouchable, even sacred. But their obsession with keeping royal blood pure led to generations of incestuous unions, where uncles married nieces, cousins became spouses, and genetic defects whispered through the veins of kings. This was not merely poor judgment, it was a spiritual arrogance, a violation of the ancient principle known across mystical traditions as Mat, Dharma, or the Great Balance. In the Old World, from Egyptian priesthoods to Vedic sages, it was taught that lineage was not just biological, it was energetic. Ancestral patterns, when distorted by ego and disconnection from divine law, could manifest in physical bodies as signs, as warnings. Charles's grotesque deformities were not random. They were symbols, living hieroglyphs of karma, unpaid. And yet, rather than looking inward, his advisors turned to rituals, exorcisms, and blame. Royal priests whispered that he had been bewitched at birth. Astrologers charted cursed stars. Foreign mystics were summoned to cleanse the air around the throne. But all the while, the real spell remained unbroken. The spell of power pursued without wisdom. Hidden in ancient alchemical texts and long-lost scrolls is the truth that rulers were once seen as sacred stewards, meant to reflect the harmony of heaven on earth. When that harmony is severed through greed, through unnatural control, the result is not just political collapse, but spiritual disease. And in Charles II, that disease was made flesh. History has buried these truths beneath layers of politics and medicine, but the ancients knew better. They saw beyond the skin. They saw the soul land, its burdens passed down like a shadow that grows darker with every generation. To understand the full weight of Charles II's fate, we must look beyond the surface, beyond his inability to walk unaided, beyond his sunken face and vacant gaze, and peer into the energetic blueprint of his soul and bloodline. The deformities were not just biological consequences of incest. They were the outer reflections of inner dissonance. In esoteric traditions, especially within Hermeticism and Kabbalah, the body is a vessel of inherited memory. The sins, virtues, and unbalanced energies of our ancestors are imprinted into our very cells, manifesting over time as blessings or as curses. Charles carried the energetic residue of generations, who twisted the sacred duty of rulership into an obsession with dominance and control. His grotesque features weren't just nature's error. They were symbols, karmic sigils, etched into flesh. His tongue, too swollen to speak clearly, was a metaphor, perhaps the universe silencing a bloodline that had spoken too many lies. His inability to produce an heir, not just infertility, but a divine closing of a chapter. The Habsburg line would end with Charles, and with it, an age ruled by power, untempered by humility. Contemporary physicians were baffled, but the mystics of the time were certain. Charles had been hexed. They believed witches or foreign sorcerers had cursed the king. But perhaps the real curse was far older and more insidious: ancestral karma, ripening at last. While royal physicians poured mercury into his body, while priests chanted Latin prayers, the true ailment, the spiritual misalignment of an empire, remained untouched. In the hidden schools of antiquity, where sages studied the alignment of stars and the patterns of human souls, it was known that great power must be counterbalanced by great responsibility. Without that balance, the soul becomes fractured, the lineage diseased, and the vessel, whether a temple, a nation, or a king, begins to collapse. Charles was not merely a ruler. He was a sacrifice, not in ritual, but in resonance. His suffering was the echo of forgotten laws, of sacred truths buried beneath gold and throne. And here lies the paradox. Though he held the most powerful seat in Europe, Charles II was powerless marionette of fate, dangling from invisible strings pulled tight by centuries of imbalance. His story is not just tragic, it is prophetic, because the forces that shaped him, the pride of legacy, the denial of nature, the arrogance of unchecked rule still echo in the modern world. We may not wear crowns, but we too inherit patterns. We too may become haunted vessels of what was left unresolved. So what, then, have we truly uncovered in the life of Charles II of Spain? Not merely the tragic tale of a deformed king, but the unraveling of a dynasty that mistook blood for divinity and legacy for immortality. His twisted body was not just the result of inbreeding, it was a message, an omen carved into royal flesh, a warning that no power, no throne, no sacred name can defy the deeper laws that govern the universe. The ancients knew this, those who read the stars, who understood the rhythms of energy, who taught that when harmony is broken, it will find a way to restore itself, often through collapse. Charles was not bewitched by witches in the forest, but by the blind ambition of those who came before him. His life was a living sigil of imbalance, and his death, the closing seal on a karmic cycle, centuries in the making. But perhaps the The most haunting truth is this: we, too, are heirs not to royal thrones, but to ancestral energies, two patterns playing out across generations. What we do not heal, we inherit. And what we inherit, if ignored, becomes our fate. So the question is not whether Charles II was cursed, but whether we are paying attention to the signs in our own lives, in the cracks of tradition, in the dysfunctions we normalize, in the legacy we choose to continue or to end. The veil has been lifted now. The story of the bewitched king is no longer buried. And if it stirred something deep within you, that's no accident. Perhaps it's time to ask, what patterns are you carrying that were never truly yours? And what will you do to break the spell? If this journey awakens something in you, let it continue. Like, comment, and subscribe as we unearth more forgotten truths and reveal the esoteric knowledge hidden in plain sight.